Assalamu alaikum. Rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Peace be upon everyone who's watching. My name is Bomer. I'm the host of the show. Welcome, Sister Katarina, the co-host, and Brother Muhammad. Assalamu alaikum to both of you.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alhamdulillah. Okay, so listen, we got a special guest backstage, Professor P.Z. Myers. Again, we're going to bring him on momentarily. We're going to make a couple of announcements before we go any further. I want to say, praise be to Allah. We seek His help and His forgiveness, and we seek refuge in Allah from the evil of our own souls and from our own bad deeds. Whom serve Allah guides, none can misguide, and whom serve Allah deems is led astray, no one can guide. I do bear witness there's no God other than Allah, and I bear witness that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is His final servant and seal of all prophets. Verily, Allah commands us to act with justice and to treat others with kindness that we would treat our own families with, and He forbids evils which pertain to ourselves and evils which may affect others. And He prohibits revolts against lawful authority. Allah warns us about being unmindful. So remember Allah, and He too will remember you. Call on Him, and He will respond to your call. For surely the divine remembrance of Allah is the highest of virtues. Alhamdulillah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Okay, so listen, before we go any further, I do want to make mention of the debate we have coming up tomorrow at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Brother Ziad Karam and Stephen Atkins, they're going to be debating where and how did Jesus claim to be God. And so that'll be once again tomorrow evening at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And I did, as usual, I posted into the chat. I posted the link for the Change for Change Foundation. If you'd like to donate to help have a water well built, to get a water wells built in areas in the world where water is scarce, please click on the link. Any small amount will help the Change for Change Foundation, one of our sponsors, in trying to get these water wells built, inshallah, God willing. So I'd like to welcome everyone. Assalamu alaikum to everyone, Muslim and non-Muslim alike. Welcome to the show if you've never been here before. This is a platform where we do discuss Islam and issues related to Islam. And Sister Katarina, before we go any further, just tell us quickly about the Qur'an Initiative, and then we'll bring in the special guest.
Yes. So the Qur'an Initiative is a project that we're doing here in Houston. Well, not only in Houston, hopefully, but we are purchasing big boxes of Qur'ans. Each box contains 52 Qur'ans, costs $104. You can see on your screen, which comes down to basically $2 per Qur'an. Any dollar amount or cent amount that you can donate, we would be grateful to have. The donations will be used to purchase Qur'ans or boxes of Qur'ans. And these Qur'ans, we will physically, Brother Kenny and I in Houston, physically, because we both live in Houston, will physically take these Qur'ans and distribute them to hotels where many of you may be familiar that there are Bibles located in the desk of hotels. We plan to go and physically place the. This is for participating hotels. I wanted to add, for participating hotels, we plan to get permission, beforehand to do this. So for complying hotels, we plan to place a copy of the Clear Qur'an, the English translation of the Clear Qur'an, in the drawer, so that someone who opens the drawer will find a copy of the Qur'an there.
Oh, right.
When the coronavirus situation gets better, then we're more favorable, then we can get back into street dawah again.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I posted the link. Actually, I'm going to post the link into the chat. Actually, I already did. Alhamdulillah, I forgot I already did it. So if you'd like to make a donation and support the show, or donate to the Dawah Fund to help purchase these Qurans, feel free to click on the Patreon link or the GoFundMe link. So let's go ahead and introduce our guest. Let me mention him before we bring him in. He's backstage right now. So it's Professor P.Z. Myers. He's a very well-known American biologist who founded and writes for Farnigula, the science blog. He's associate professor, alhamdulillah. He's associate professor of biology at the University of Minnesota Morris, where he works in the field of developmental biology. And he is a critic of intelligent design, and he's a member of the creationist movement and other pseudoscientific concepts. So he's a very well-known figure. And with no further ado, let's bring Professor P.Z. Myers to the platform. Professor P.Z. Myers, welcome to the show. How are you?
Hello. Doing good.
Great. We're glad to see you. We have a couple other gentlemen that are on the panel. Brother Muhammad's there. I'm going to bring in Brother Nadir Ahmed, and I see a gentleman by the name of Bob Webster that I'm not really familiar with. But we're just wanting to have an open discussion primarily about the Quran. We know you're a biologist. We respect your work, obviously, and we just kind of want to get your opinion about what you think about the Quran and the references to science. Obviously, we know that the Quran is getting someone's phone ringing somewhere. Actually, it's Okay, that's actually someone trying to call me on Facebook, so I had to X out of that. So I do apologize for that. Stephen Atkins probably checking in about the debate tomorrow. So, in regards to the Quran, obviously the Quran is not a book of science. It's a book of signs. Literally, the verses of the Quran are referred to ayah. They're called ayah in the Arabic language, which literally means signs. So Allah says in the Quran, surely we'll show them our signs in the universe and within themselves until they know that this truth is from their Lord. So obviously, things that were revealed in the Quran, 1,400 years ago in the 7th century, in the time of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, people in that time could not relate to what was going to be revealed in our time, obviously with modern technology and so forth. Now, the complexity of the Quran and the wisdom of the Quran is that things that were mentioned even then fit their time, as well as things that were going to be transpiring in the future with the advent of modern technology that has drawn attention to these signs that the Quran is referencing. So, Matt, so let me introduce someone else that's going to be part of the discussion. Brother Nadir Ahmed, he's engaged in many discussions regarding the Quran and science. So we welcome you to the show, Brother Nadir Ahmed. Are you there? Assalamu alaikum.
Oh, thank you. Very nice meeting both of you. Nice meeting you, PC, Dr. PC Meyer.
Yeah, okay, so we're good. Before we get into the topic at hand, Brother Nadir, are you going to turn your camera on here shortly, or?
Oh, yeah, sorry about that.
There you go. Okay, so Professor Myers, so give me a quick rundown about your understanding of the Quran. I don't know how much, if you've looked into it at all, or if you've I know you've addressed some points in the past, but I just kind of want to get give you a chance to talk about your understanding of the Quran, and we'll proceed from there.
Sure. I am not a student of the Quran, so I have been introduced to some of the sections of the text because people have claimed that they are compatible or support certain ideas in my field of research. And that's about the limits of it. What I've seen of the Quran in this very limited, very narrow context is that no, not really. It's as you said earlier, it is not a science textbook.
No.
And it would be a terrible mistake to try to interpret it as anything trying to make a scientific description of how embryology works.
Yeah. Okay, so in regards to embryology, I just want to read something quickly, before we get into embryology, I just want to make it clear that we're just trying to have a general discussion, and we do realize that the Quran is giving statements which are can be a bit ambiguous in some places. Matter of fact, there's a surah of the Quran, a chapter of the Quran, chapter 3, verse 7, that says that there's some verses of the Quran that are clear, and they're the foundation of the book, such as our Creator is one, referring to our Creator as one, and so forth. So there's some clear statements. There's other statements that are a bit ambiguous that you have to do some study on. You have to do some research. And in regards to that research, I'm sure you're familiar with the name Professor Keith Moore, which is, I'm sure this always comes up in these discussions. But I want to make mention of a couple of things. Not only Professor Keith Moore, but there's also a biologist here in Houston, and his name is Jolie Simpson, and he was the chairman of the Department of Obstetrics and Gynecology at the Baylor College of Medicine here in Houston. And he says in regards to the hadith, and I'm not sure if you're familiar with what hadith are, but they're the sayings of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. And he says, and I quote, and this is Dr. Lee Moore Simpson here in Houston, Baylor College of Medicine. And he says, and I quote, these hadiths could not be obtained on the basis of scientific knowledge of the 7th century. And he goes on to say, not only is there no conflict between the genetics and the religion, but in fact, Islam may guide science by adding revelation to some traditional scientific approaches. He says there exist statements in the Quran shown centuries later to be valid, which support knowledge in the Quran having been derived from God. So this is, once again, Dr. Joe Lee Simpson. I'm not sure if you're familiar with his name. Have you ever heard of him, Dr. Meyer? Okay.
No,
so,
I've heard of more, of course, but not
yeah.
Simpson.
So a lot of people go to
I've
more.
worked with that doctor. I'm a nurse practitioner in Houston myself, and I've worked with that doctor.
Yeah, so a lot of people that when they talk about this issue, they go to Dr. Keith Moore because at one time he was obviously he was the author of the book or co-author of the book, The Developing Human, and he was once the chairman of the Department of Anatomy with the University of Toronto, and he actually won the JCB Grant Award from the Canadian Association of Anatomists, and this occurred after attending the 7th Medical Conference in Dammam, Saudi Arabia. And he says in regards to the Quran, he says, and I quote, it's been a great pleasure for me to clarify statements in the Quran about human development. And it is clear to me that the statements must have come to Muhammad from God, rather, because all this knowledge was not discovered until many centuries later. And so it's kind of a similar statement to Joe Simpson, Dr. Joe Simpson. But so he goes on to say, this proves to me that Muhammad must have been a messenger of God, end of quote. And he has another statement that he makes, which is, and I quote, says, most of the information concerning embryology in the Quran is in perfect conformity with modern discoveries in this field. And he ends by saying there's no conflict at all. Of course, he's taken statements. Both of these doctors, both embryologists, were taking statements that were ambiguous. That it's not going to go into scientific details, obviously, but was given statements that were, stating that the Quran was giving information that just simply could not be known in the 7th century. So, go ahead, Mr. Myers.
Well, okay. So, yeah, I strongly disagree with those comments because
it's not a science book.
Yes, it's not a science book. You know, the chapter or the section that describes the embryology of the human is it's like a paragraph. It's a short general summary of development. And it's nothing unusual. It is what anyone in the 7th century who was well informed about what we knew about science at the time, who was familiar with Aristotle and Galen, would say about development. So there's no radical, surprising, revolutionary insights anywhere in the Quran, at least as far as embryology. I haven't read enough. Maybe there's great, glorious things elsewhere, but the embryology is conventional and it's a little bit simplistic.
Okay, so brother Nadir Ahmed, he's almost an authority on these issues and in all the research that he's done in covering the scientific. I don't even like referring to them as scientific verses of the Quran because once again it's not a book of science, but we know that we're referring to the verses that are referring to the development in the womb. So Nadir, go ahead and make a statement here if you'd like.
Sure. Yeah. And I was mentioning to Kenny that, before we even go to embryology, why not talk about what atheists and Muslims can agree on and things which, obviously embryology is a very complicated subject, but there are things which I think an atheist can look at the Quran and can say, you know what, I like that. That's a good point. And so, this is something often missed where, we don't talk about the commonalities which we have. So I actually made like a couple of points, which I think an atheist can look at this and say, you know what? Okay, well, that's a good point, and I like that. So I'm going to share my desktop here real quick, if I may.
Sure.
Yeah. And actually, you know what? My
this is
thing
what started my journey to Islam, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
Just throw
application window. Okay. Well, so basically, one of the points, there was a recent study done on actually fetal alcohol syndrome. And in this study, and I'm going to try to find a way to basically share my desktop here because it's not giving me the option right now. But in this study, basically what it was concluded, they found a relationship between Islam and Christianity. And what they found was that when it came to Islam, were that because of Islam, Muslim women were 50 times less likely to suffer from fetal alcohol syndrome. While on the other hand, because of what the Bible teaches in terms of alcohol, Christians were more likely to basically suffer from fetal alcohol syndrome. So in another study, it was determined that they actually asked all the Muslim women to basically go home. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen over here just so we can kind of get a look at that real quick.
Sure.
Can you guys see my document here?
Yes.
Can you guys see my screen? Okay, I just want to show you the studies here. So basically, to sum it up, you got to go to the Christians to study fetal alcohol syndrome. And so what we see is that because of the Qur'an saved millions and millions of children from fetal alcohol syndrome. Now, I'm not claiming this is a scientific miracle. That's not what I'm doing. Again, I'm just trying to show, I know I want to, for a second, for the atheists and everyone to bury the hatchet. And my question for PZ Myers, can you at least look at this one fact and say, okay, well, this is a good thing that, okay, Islam, Muslim women are 50 times less likely to suffer from fetal alcohol syndrome?
Well, yes. I mean, if you have a prescription against drinking alcohol, you're going to have a lower frequency of fetal alcohol syndrome. This is not a surprise.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah. So, like I said, the issue here is not to basically prove that this is a Qur'an Science miracle, but there are issues where the point which I want to raise here is that one of the things we do notice about Islam is that it alleviates the needless suffering of man. So basically coming out, we now know from science, just coming out and saying, okay, go and have some beer, like what we see inside the Bible. You could drink some alcohol, don't get drunk. That's not the right answer. Because there's children involved, there's pregnant women involved, and you just cannot do that. In fact, we know from history, in Christian Europe, children began drinking beer at age 5. So, but the misery and suffering doesn't end over there. So, okay, this is a good point. So I also wanted to bring up another point, which I think you'll also find, you could also kind of nod your head and say, okay, well, that's also another good point as well. So another thing which we find inside the Bible was the rulings of, right here, the blood on the bed sheets. This is a virginity test. This is found inside the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 22, verse 17, where it says, and they shall spread the garments of the before the elders. And basically, if there's no proof of the woman's virginity can be found, she'll be stoned to death. So this tradition has even, kind of carried down into Christian society, where, now women have to go through this. But here's a problem. We now know from science today, there are women who don't have hymens, who are not going to bleed on the bedsheet. We know that there's people that the hymen can get ruptured in horseback riding. We know that there are women who have been sexually abused. So to put these girls through a virginity test is cruel and unusual punishment for a sexually abused victim. However, when we go to the Quran, what we see is that in the Quran, there is no virginity test. In fact, the Hadith of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam abolishes the practice. It says, the most wicked among the people in the eyes of Allah on the day of judgment is a man who goes to his wife and she comes to him and then he divulges her secret, like holding up the bed. She say, hey, look over here, which is a tradition in Christian Armenia because of what the Bible teaches. So my question for PZ Myers, could this be another head nod? Okay, yeah, I like this teaching of no virginity test in Islam.
Well, but of course, Islam does make a big deal about virginity, even if there is no virginity test. But yes, I would agree that that this is not something, that this Christian teaching is not something I agree with. But then I am an atheist. I disagree with almost all of Christianity. So You're setting up easy things to knock down here, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, again, all I'm doing is building a bridge, a commonality between Islam and the atheists. And there's things they can look in there and see that and say, okay, well, I like that teaching, and we now know at least one of the intentions behind Muhammad is to alleviate the suffering. So now we saw that he saved millions of children from FAS. And not only that, but also there's many groups of people who just can't have any alcohol, like American Indians and Eskimos and others than them. And I don't know why, but the rates of alcoholism is so much more in them. So there's one more thing I wanted to show, which you could probably nod your head and say, okay, well, I like that teaching. And that is divorce in the case of adultery only. So the Bible in Matthew chapter 5, verse 31 says, pretty much you can only get a divorce if you committed adultery or, in death. And because of that, you'll find 90% of Christians will practice that. But there is like a 10% who will practice that. And you have people like Dr. Michael Brown, who becomes like the enforcer of Matthew 5:31, and basically enforces that you must live single. So if you're a 16-year-old girl, you got divorced, that's it. Unless it's for adultery and or death, there's no other option. So this has a horrific trickle-down effect, because the Bible endorses single motherhood for divorce, and there are a lot of women who do that. I actually met a couple. But now the Quran abolishes this practice inside chapter 66, verse 5. It says, perhaps his Lord, if he divorced you, would substitute for him wives better than you. Now, who are these wives? Submitting to Allah, believing, devoutly obedient, repenting, worshiping, and traveling, and previously married, and virgins. So the Quran says yes. And in chapter 60 of verse divorce, it abolishes Matthew chapter 5, verse 31. So that's my final point. So I guess, could we get a head nod from you and say, okay, well, yeah, this is a better teaching?
Better, but, again, I wouldn't be defending Christianity, and I would say that a man and a woman should be allowed to divorce under any circumstances that are mutually desirable. So, and that it shouldn't interfere with forming a relationship with anyone afterwards. So, sure, I'll go along with that.
Okay, so there's a commonality between us. And so, and this is what my point here is. What we now know, at least this one passage over here, this one instance, is that the Prophet of Islam was clearly abolishing some of the needless practices of the Bible, which causes misery and suffering. And I think even an atheist and even many Christians can even look at that and say, okay, well, that's good. So I guess we're ready to talk about embryology. Did you wanted to say a couple of things on that, PZ?
Oh, you were breaking up there. What was
it? He was asking if you would like to comment on the embryology. I'd mentioned what Dr. Keith Moore and Dr. Jolie Simpson had mentioned in regards to their reading the Quran and seeing the parallels and things that they demonstrated. Both of them mentioned that there's no way that someone in the 7th century could have known these things. Matter of fact, before we get into that, I want to mention just quickly, because it's another scientist, Dr. Durga Rao, and he was a marine biologist, and he says, and I quote, scientists, and he's a marine geologist, rather, not biologist, a marine geologist, and he says, and I quote, scientists have only been able to confirm with the help of modern equipment that there is darkness in the depths of the ocean. And he says 1,400 years ago, a normal human could not explain this phenomenon in so much detail. Thus, the information must have come from a supernatural source. So this is the third professor that has made a declaration. Of course, this is a different field of study, obviously, but this is 3 professors that have stated that they believe, based on their reading the Quran and seeing things that surely were mentioned in the Quran that could not have been known to the people in the desert at that time in the 7th century. and they all agree that it must have come from a higher source, and they all refer to obviously our Creator. So we're getting feedback from someone. So if someone's watching on the panel, I think maybe Mr. Webster, if you're watching on YouTube or Facebook, please cancel those feeds out and just deal with us here in the platform. Otherwise, we'll get feedback. So Professor Myers, I'm just curious as to what your maybe you haven't seen all the works by these two other professors in embryology. But just kind of curious.
Well, obviously, I'm really familiar with Keith Moore's work. I mean,
Okay.
he's extremely
Well, yeah,
influential.
his book. I think, matter of fact, the third edition of his book, the 1982 edition, is still in circulation in universities all over the world as as one of the textbooks.
Yeah, he wrote several textbooks that are
Yeah.
still in use in nursing schools and medical schools.
Yes.
But I would disagree most vehemently with him that nothing in the Quran is unusual, exceptional, or something that could not have been known already.
Well, you mentioned Galen and Aristotle earlier, and I know you've heard the argument before. It's which it's a valid argument. It would have to imply that if the Prophet, peace be upon him, who could not read or write, if he got information from Galen or Aristotle, how would he have done so? Because there were no Arabic text at that time. A matter of fact, until the Quran was written, there was no Arabic text. It was a matter of fact, the Arabs in that time were they were known for memorizing poetry and so forth, and there were just no text. 98% of the people there could not read nor write. So there would be no way that he would be able to access this material. But even if he had access to this material, it would imply that he must have extracted the things that were in agreement with science and rejected those things that weren't. But even Aristotle and Galen, there were mistakes made in their work. I mean, they did a lot of theories, hypotheses.
Yes.
I think Galen in particular, he believed that the human being was ejaculated, a miniature version of the human being was in the semen of the in the semen, and it was
that would have been Hippocrates. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there were definitely errors in Aristotle and Galen. But the thing is that the way that Muhammad avoided making those same errors was with his remarkable brevity. He doesn't go into any of the details that, for instance, Aristotle went into. If you read, The Generation of Animals by Aristotle, it goes on at quite a length, discussing a great many topics in detail, discussing experiments and observations. And of course, when you do that, you're going to make lots and lots of mistakes. So there's errors riddled throughout. Yeah. But the core ideas that Aristotle came up with, his ideas of epigenesis and the idea that there's a sequential production of stages in the embryo, that's 4th century BC stuff. It's been there for quite a while. Galen, of course, is 2nd century AD, and he's got the same ideas in there. There is nothing in the Quran that contradicts the ideas of Galen and Aristotle.
Okay, well, that's an interesting point. And I'm so sorry I didn't mean to interrupt you. I'm so sorry about that. But that's an interesting point, because what we're trying to do here is we're trying to find those things that are actually that are agreeing with science. Obviously, the Quran's not going to give all the detail and so forth, but I think what you just mentioned is these things that we find they're parallels. So the Quran's not contradicting what's being stated. So are you saying that you believe that what the Prophet, peace be upon him, got is consistent with what Galen and Aristotle were revealing at that time?
Yes, but that's because what Aristotle and Galen taught is common knowledge among any educated person at the time.
Okay, so if that's the case, would you agree that the Quran would be consistent? If that's the case, the Quran is consistent with science in these particular things which is why Dr. Moore and Dr. Simpson would have made the statements that they made.
Not quite. I mean, I would say that it is true that what's in the Quran is consistent with what was known in the 7th century throughout Europe. Okay. But what I would disagree with him, what I disagree with Moore on, is the idea that this was somehow beyond what anyone could have known in the 7th century. Because this is all stuff that was published and circulating everywhere. It was taken for granted. Even the bits that were wrong were taken for granted by the general educated public.
Well,
So this is not at all.
I find it striking that not only Keith Moore, I know he's the one, because he's the one who originally revealed this information, and it created a big stir and so forth. But once again, the doctor here in Houston that Sister Katerina knows personally, Dr. Lee Simpson, he's made this similar statement based on his reading of the Quran, and it's also whether or not he may be familiar with who Keith Moore is, but he must have. Dr. Simpson agreed with Keith Moore, so it's. I'm just curious as to.
Yeah. Well, could we do this? Could we just show him like some real evidence that he could at least look at?
Sure.
And maybe he's just not. As he was mentioning, he may not be so well versed in the scientific miracles of the Quran. I know you did have a talk with Hamza Zortis and I believe Adnan. Oh, I forgot his. I just forgot his last name. But and I understand maybe you were not convinced. And see, the thing is with embryology, it's very hard to convince somebody about that because it's just so complicated. But there are more simple things. Now, one of the things I wanted to show you, I'm going to share my desktop over here, if I may. Let me share. Okay, here we go. So there are things which the Quran actually did correct, which is from Aristotle and other than them. So one of the things which they talked about is how the gender was determined. So can you guys see my desktop over here?
Let me. There you go.
Is that better?
Yes.
There we go. As you know, with your scientist, P.Z. Meyer, what determines the male and the female? Well, basically, it's the daddy sperm, as we can see over here. The daddy sperm determines whether a baby will be a boy or a girl. Now, here's what the ancients had to say about that. Aristotle said that the male is characterized by an abundance of superior element of fire, whereas a female has an abundance of water and is therefore rather cold. Now, Romans and Hippocrates said male offsprings come from the right side of the male and the female from the left side. Now, of course, this is all wrong, as we all know. Even some Muslims commented on it. They said it has no natural cause. And so the list goes on. In fact, in the Talmud, it says, if the woman emits her semen first, she bears a male child. Now, the question is, the Quran also talked about this. Does it just parrot what the ancient says? Let's take a look. The Quran states inside chapter 53, verse 45, and it's he who created the two mates, the male and the female, from a sperm drop when it is emitted. And this is exactly what we know from science. Now, here's what my point here is. And this is something which a lot of people get confused on. Just because you see something which agrees with modern science, that doesn't mean it's automatically a scientific miracle. There could be many reasons for that. In fact, I make an acronym. We got to call the cops when you see something like that. And what the COPS stands for is that it's just an acronym. This could be a coincidence. It could be something obvious, could be plagiarism, or maybe Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was a scientist. Obvious doesn't fit here. Plagiarism doesn't fit here. Scientist doesn't fit here. The only thing we could say is maybe this is a kind of coincidence. He meant to talk about something else, but he just used a choice of words which does match up with modern science. Did you have something to say? Did you want to just comment on that, PZ?
Well, yeah, because what you're glossing over is that the statements in the Quran are extremely general and brief. and it's not hard to get something roughly correct. I mean, it's like I could say that, oh, the way a car works is that the motor makes the wheels go round, and I would be correct in the most broadest sense of the word, but you wouldn't be able to say that I have in-depth knowledge of auto mechanics.
Sure, sure. So what it sounds like you're saying, what you're saying is that the Quran is actually agreeing with the science. So there's no contradiction there.
Assalamu alaikum.
No.
Bear with me 1 second, Brother Ibn Anwar. So if the Quran is not, it's obviously not contradicting the science. It sounded like that you was in agreement with what was stated. And obviously we know that it's not a book of science, so it's not going into vast detail. But do you agree? Do you agree that the Quran is actually consistent with what you find in the science in regards to the issue?
I think you're trying too hard to squeeze an agreement out of me, because I disagree.
Well, hold on. Can I jump in real quick?
Yeah,
I agree.
What I think is that you've got a Quran which has an author who is familiar with contemporary ideas in the science of his time, and he is reiterating those as a small part of the story he's trying to tell. That
Right.
he's
Might I
not
chime in?
writing. Yeah, he's not writing a book about.
bear with me,
he's
Brother
not-
Ibn Anwar.
He's not writing a book about developmental biology. He's writing a book about, social mores and ethical rules and religious beliefs and all these things that were important to him. So when he gets a few hits in very broadly general statements, that says nothing about how authoritative he is about science.
Just
Well,
let me take 10
but-
seconds. Let me take 10 seconds.
Okay, go ahead,
Let me-
Nadeem.
Okay, I just want to take 10 seconds. Okay. I agree with what PZ is saying. What he's basically saying is that this could be an accidental agreement with modern science, which is exactly what I was pointing out. This falls under the category of coincidence, an unexpected agreement. So let's move on to the next point. And it's hypothetically possible, but we will rule out coincidence later on. Go ahead.
Wait,
Can we go to the next-
I would not say it's just simple coincidence. Not at all. Because what Muhammad was doing is building upon a scholarly history that goes back, like 1100 years, right? Where they've got all this stuff where people have made observations and experiment, and they've accumulated this body of knowledge. And one of your choices there was plagiarism, and I would disagree vehemently with the idea that it's plagiarism. It's just awareness of the science of the day.
How?
Okay.
This was
Wait a second. The science of the day was all wrong, as we can see from the screen.
no, it wasn't all wrong.
Okay.
There were
Who
significant
said-
parts of Aristotle and Galen that were correct. There were
No, I mean,
some
on gender
things that got wrong.
determination. On gender.
Hey,
determination. Who
Might
said
I
that?
ask?
But hold on, Brother Ibn Anwar.
Who said that it came from the sperm? Which person said that?
Aristotle, well,
No,
Aristotle
he
had
didn't.
very complicated views there. But yeah,
His view is right here.
there was a general bias to think that the male agent was the determinant of the major properties of the embryo, and that the female was providing sort of passive material for it.
Well, this is what Aristotle says over here. Okay, it's talked about the abundance of a superior element of fire. But let me just say this: I agree with Peasy. We just cannot jump to conclusions and say that this is a scientific miracle by looking at one thing. These are all hypothetical possibilities which Peasy is bringing up. Let's entertain them. Maybe there was some source out there which described it. So my point is this: look. All what you're saying, I agree with you. These are all hypothetical possibilities. But the question is, for really our job is, can we rule out coincidence? So I believe we can, if we can just go to the next verse, which agrees with modern science. And I'll be very quick on this. So here is chapter 16, verse 68. Now this talks about the bee, and it talked about the fee, and it says, and the bee, and it says, and take and account how many scientifically correct statements you'll find in this one condensed verse. It says, take the inhabitants in the mountains and in the trees. Now the bee here is actually female, and that is right. It is the female bee which does that. Number one. Then eat of all the fruits. Do bees eat fruits? Yes, they do. Number two. And then it says, and follow their ways of the Lord, which makes for you easy. There comes forth from their bellies a drink of varying colors. Number three is talking about honey. That does the honey come from the stomach of the bee? Yes, it's called the honey stomach. And then number four, wherein is a healing for men. Four scientifically correct, or so we could say scientifically correct or scientifically acceptable statements condensed in one sentence. How is that possible?
How that is possible is that there is a long history of apiculture. People have been raising bees for thousands of years. And so, yeah, we'd expect them to have some familiarity with the basic agriculture of bees. So
that's hypothetically possible, but now here's the problem with that. If you are doing research on bees, that comes with an error to truth ratio of about 10-1 or something like that. Meaning it comes through trial and error. You're making 10 errors for every one scientifically correct findings. And that's within 10 pages or something like that. Not condensed in one sentence. And my point here is, never mind what scientifically is correct here. The miracle of this one verse is not, okay, it all agrees with science. The miracle is here is, how did you make 4 scientifically correct statements without error? That's the miracle. And that's a challenge we put for you, PZ, if you can present to us a reasonable explanation.
It's pretty straightforward. You go talk to beekeepers.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So research, as I told you, that if you talk to beekeepers and you're doing research, actually Aristotle did research on bees, and he made several scientific errors on there. Actually, in his research, he discovered nothing of significance. So my point here is, okay, if you talk to beekeepers, if you're doing your own research, that comes with an error to truth ratio of at least 10-1. So how do you explain that?
Well, Aristotle was doing his research 1,000 years before Muhammad. So even if there was a 10-1 error to correct assumption here, which I kind of doubt actually, that would still be just fine. That's perfectly compatible with the observation. We basically do not need to invoke a deity in order to explain the observation.
Okay, so it sounds like another area where the Quran is actually consistent with science, correct? I mean, that's.
But I think, PZ, I think you're missing the point here. I mean, okay, if you talk to beekeepers, if you're doing your own research, you're going to make mistakes. My point here is, how is it that you made 4 scientifically correct statements without making a mistake, condensed in one verse? Look, research comes, if you're talking to beekeepers, if you're talking to these people, it comes by making hypotheses, postulums, theories, calculations. All of this is in Galen's book. All of this is in Aristotle's books. He talks about many theories. But where's the theories? Where's the postulums? Where's the hypothesis? Where is the research here? That's my point here. This is and I don't think you're presenting a very good explanation of why we see what we're seeing in front of us.
Because what Muhammad is presenting in the Quran is a distillation of the current knowledge of the time. So of course you're going to have fewer errors in that case. Okay. And to say that, well, he said these 4 things that were accurate in one sentence is not a big deal. I mean, for instance, if I said, okay, a car uses a motor to turn the wheels and it burns gasoline to propel itself, and it's got a steering wheel so you can turn it, those would be things that I would get correct, but it's no great insight. It's a casual observation built on some experience, but it doesn't say anything about my knowledge of auto mechanics.
So if you're copying from somebody from a previous source, you're going to copy their scientific errors in them. Like Aristotle's work has so many errors in it. If you're doing your own research, you are going to make a lot of mistakes before you get anything right. So PZ, I'm thinking about what you're saying, and I'm trying to understand, okay, wait a second. I mean, what you're saying, PZ, is hypothetically possible. You can derive this from observation. All of it is hypothetically possible, what you're talking about, but what's not possible, and the issue which I think you're not addressing, is the same thing with the whole issue about the sperm cell. you know, that the genders come from the sperm. You're not able to address the fact that there's no scientific errors. The issue about how you got it right, I don't care. The issue is how'd you get it right without making an error? That's a scientific miracle.
No, it's not a miracle at all. I disagree completely. That
How do you put that?
that if you know what you're doing is comparing a brief work of poetry to a detailed scientific treatise from 1,000 years before. And yes, of course, the more detailed, the lengthier, the greater the amount of material in the manuscript, the greater the likelihood you're going to find errors. But when you're just distilling it down to, oh, here's a few things we're sure about, then you're far less likely to promote an error. So it's not at all miraculous. It doesn't surprise me at all.
Right. So let's call the cops here. Let's analyze it here. So you are right. It's a person can be poetic, but that falls under the category of coincidence, meaning you're trying to describe something poetic and beautiful, and whoa, I just made 4 scientifically correct statements. Whoa, that's called coincidence. It was an accidental occurrence. But that was the case with what you said, which was the sperm cell, meaning that this was something, you know, just his true intention was not to state something scientifically. You see, you only have 2 options here. Either it's a coincidence or it is something from the divine. Because coincidence meaning it is purely accidental discovery, a stroke of luck, a poetic expression, accidentally agreeing with science. But here's my point. We can rule out coincidence now because we just saw it happen with the sperm cell thing. And now 4 examples, so now we know coincidence cannot be the case here. Plagiarism, no, because none of this knowledge existed in the past. And if you're doing that, you're going to be copying their scientific errors. And if you're just observing nature, you're going to make a ton of scientific errors. It's not going to be condensed. And that's a miracle here. I mean, if this was 4 statements in like 10 pages, okay, I can kind of see that, but not condensed in 1 verse. That's what's so, you know, we're like, whoa, what is this? And I don't think and I think I would ask for you to ponder over this, P.Z. Meyer.
No, I find the argument ludicrous that, you know, now it would be easy to make a number of accurate statements about scientific phenomena that might occasionally have errors in them. And the shorter the comment we make, the more certain we are of the material we're saying, the less likely you'll include an error in that statement. And I would say that's all we've got here. And I would also say that you've set up some false dichotomies here, because it's not between plagiarism and coincidence. What we have here is clearly an example of the promotion of the informed knowledge of the day. It's neither coincidence nor plagiarism. And to try and force it into those 2 bins and then say, because it doesn't fit neither of those, it's a miracle, is kind of missing the point. It's just common, ordinary knowledge.
Yeah. But see, that I think what you're missing here, and I've explained to you a couple of times, is the informed knowledge of the day. This stuff was not informed knowledge of the day. Even today, in my last debate, they didn't know that bees eat fruit. 99.9% of people don't even know that. But anyways, if you are copying from the informed knowledge of those people, then you are going to be making all kinds of scientific blunders and errors because the knowledge is all tainted with errors. And I think, you know, this is something which I would ask for you to please ponder over and see how is this possible, because this is something I think you're not understanding here. And so the explanations you give, it just doesn't really make a lot of sense. So first you save millions of children from fetal alcohol syndrome. Then you correct 3 scientific errors of the Bible, and there's more. Then you give 4 scientifically correct statements about the bee, and then you give another scientifically correct statement, and you're saying all this can be informed knowledge of the day? Am I hearing you correctly?
Yeah, because nothing that you stated was in defiance of the extant knowledge in the 7th century. This is what the educated populace thought. So to cite this as somehow a miracle
Well,
Yes.
let me ask a quick question. Professor Myers, when the embryo is in the womb, would you agree that it's protected by three layers? Is that an accurate way to describe it? Is it protected by three layers within the
No,
womb? It's not.
no.
So
Can I ask something?
go ahead, Brother Ibn Anwar. But I'd like for him to address
Yeah.
the question that I asked him. So, in regards to the embryo being within the embryonic sac, and then within the womb itself, and so forth, and then the epidermis and so forth, do you agree that it would be in a protected state in three stages?
No, I would say that's kind of a gross oversimplification of the system.
Okay, can you explain
So
it?
a placental mammal has multiple membranes, and they're not as simple as layer 1, layer 2, layer 3 outside.
Yeah.
There's more than 3, and they're interacting with each other in complicated ways. And they have a complicated topology. So and furthermore, the layers it's more than just protection.
I'm talking about the I'm not an embryologist, but by no means.
Yeah.
But I'm saying the embryonic sac itself. So and then
Which embryonic sac?
well, how many are there?
There's 3 or 4 at least.
There's 3.
Now, that's a fine example of selective use of the information.
Well, is there 3? There's 3.
There's more than that. I mean,
there's more than 3 embryonic
I'm
sacs.
trying to picture and enumerate all the layers that are in there. I mean, there's multiple placental layers. There's the allantois. There's the placenta itself. There's stuff all over the place in there.
Okay.
Well,
So if we go back to the earlier examples, what this is a fine example of grossly simplifying and then suggesting, well, there's layers, and I would agree with you. There's layers, lots of layers.
The point being that no one would know about these layers in the 7th century.
Yes, they would.
And as a matter of fact, the Quran also mentions, and I believe this is Surah 96, in regards to the stages of development. I think you mentioned the stages of development earlier. But it says in particular, it says that it is we who created you in the womb of your mothers, and one act of creation after another, referring to the stages of development within the womb itself. And then it goes on to say, in 3 veils of darkness. And so I've got some research here. I'll bring it up here in a minute. I just wanted to get your initial response to it. But we'll see that here in a moment that the embryologists that I'm going to mention, they're going to state quite clearly that this is absolutely consistent with what we find in the womb. So we'll get to that in a minute. I want to go to Brother Ibn Anwar. He's been dying to ask a question.
Yeah, it's just a simple question. Hello there, Professor. It's good to be able to speak to you. My question is quite simple. Do you believe that the embryonic stages, the chronological articulation of it in the Quran, is that corresponds to how Aristotle put it? Is it the chronological stage
it
development?
corresponds very well with Galen's ideas, with his 4 stages of development. Aristotle wasn't that specific about number of stages, so
you'd say that the Quranic, the chronology that the Quran gives of the embryonic development mirrors word for word what Galen said? Chronologically,
word for word, I don't know, since I don't read Arabic and I don't read Latin, but in general, yes, that there is a correspondence between, Galen starts off with a drop of semen and goes through sort of an amorphous stage, and then a stage that's got its rough shape, and things like that. And again, we're giving everyone involved the benefit of the doubt because they're all using very vague generalities. So it's like, sure, it corresponds, but so what? It doesn't have the detail I expect of modern embryology.
Well, it's not modern embryology. That's the whole point. This is 7th century.
Exactly, it is
illiterate man out in the desert. So he didn't have to have access to modern technology to have that information.
I agree. It's standard 7th century science.
But you know what? If I may just say something about embryology, as I mentioned to you, Kenny, I would like to just kind of stay away from embryology because it's a very complicated subject, and and there are some issues which I think we are not considering there if we looked into it. But I want to just go back to a statement which you said, PZ, and I want to assure you, you said that all the knowledge about the bee, about the male being the person who determines the gender, you said this was educated populace. The educated populace believed this. I would like to inform you that I've looked into this, and that's not true. There's no reference in any book which I know which talks about the bee, as I showed you, about the gender determination. And even if there was, and and I guess here's my question, which you were not able to answer. If you're copying from the educated populace, the informed knowledge of the day, how are you doing that without copying their scientific errors? And I don't think you were able to explain how that works.
Because the section of the Quran that deals with embryology is this long.
No, I'm talking about the bee and the. I want to get away from embryology because it's problematic.
Well, yeah, I think that's a little bit sneaky because I've been brought on because I'm a developmental biologist. Embryology is something I know, and now you're telling me, that's the one subject we are going to steer away from.
Oh no, we can. I'm sorry, that was my mistake. We could. Okay, I tell you what, I do have Galen stages actually. If we want, we can take a look at that, and we can see if there's any similarities. Because now this is also, you see, this is something when we attack the Quran and say this was copied from Galen, and this is something which I have noticed time and time again. It only further proves the Quran to be a scientific miracle. Okay, and I'm going to show you how.
Okay, well, just one thing I have to say though is saying that the Quran includes the knowledge of the day is not attacking the Quran.
Well, to say he plagiarized.
I'm not saying he plagiarized.
Mm-hmm.
I'm saying that he was reflecting the information that was available at the time. And
to be fair to Professor Myers, he's just he's not making that claim. Yeah, he's not making a claim that the Prophet Muhammad was cribbing from something. He's just articulating the knowledge that perhaps was in circulation. Yeah.
Yes. So I've never done any research on gastrulation, yet I can talk about gastrulation for long periods of time, and everything I say is derived from the literature. And this is not an example of me stealing information from other people. This is what we do in science: is we communicate the information that we have at hand. And I think Muhammad was doing exactly the same thing.
Well, the interesting thing is that there's no evidence of such a claim. So the evidence that we have is, and it's very reliable evidence, is that the people of the time were 95-98% illiterate, and so there's nothing in Islamic history or in the matter of fact, I have 2 books on the biography of peace be upon him, and nothing mentions anything close to him being in or around people who would have this type of knowledge. And if he had been, this would mean that he would have to have been around geologists. People were studying geology and all different types of fields of study.
This is what Professor Montgomery.
Bear with me, Brother Ibn Anwar. Bear with me 1 second. So this would mean that the Prophet, peace be upon him, would have had to extract all the things from all these different fields of study that were consistent with and they were accurate in order to add them to the Quran, and we don't. There's no evidence for such things transpiring. There's nothing in Islamic history.
Here is the Aristotle and Galen's view of embryology right in front of you, and we don't find any of this in the Quran. I mean, these are all scientific errors. Like Aristotle regarded the ovary and testes as unimportant organs. They believe that that the fetus is a mixture of sperm and menstrual fluid, and none of this stuff is in the Quran. So how could someone borrow from them? And we don't find any of their scientific errors.
So I think Professor Myers, I think if I can help clear the air a little bit, I think what Nadir is trying to say here is that yes, the knowledge of the day mirrors much of what we see in the Quran, but the problem really is with regard to the knowledge of the day, we can find mistakes in them, and you've said that. But when it comes to what we find in the Quran, would you say that there are any mistakes in, say, the embryonic points mentioned in the Quran? Are there any mistakes with
That's a
those?
good point.
Yes.
Okay, which one?
Yes, that the Quran takes a very simplistic and a very sequential view of things. The things that the Quran says are sequential, like what is it, bones first, then clothed with flesh. That is incorrect. That's not what happens in the embryo.
If I may correct you on that, the Quran doesn't say bones come first and then flesh. This is a misreading of the text.
It comes together simultaneously.
Well, the Quran doesn't talk anything about when bones comes and when flesh comes. That is I think people are misreading the text over there. In fact, let me see if I could get something for you on that. I can pull up the verse and we can look at it together. I think the verse is, let's see, bones, Quran, bones, clothed, flesh clothed bones. And we can look at it together. I think this is it right here. Okay. So, this is the verse I think the verse in question is about tape. It says, then we made the sperm drop into a clinging clot. We made the clot into a lump of flesh. We made from the lump bones, and we covered the bones with flesh. So this is my point. We covered the bones with flesh. The text doesn't say when the bones was created. It doesn't say when the flesh was created. It's just a matter of covering bones with flesh. So I think that's a misreading of the text.
Okay, but you're making my point for me. I got it up here on my computer too, and that is kind of a pathetic description of development. It really doesn't say much of anything. It repeats Aristotle's error that it's the sperm that is determinant.
What did Aristotle say? I'm sorry. What did Aristotle's error again?
Oh, the idea that sperm is what determines the embryo. So the correct.
I'm sorry, you're cutting out. I did not hear you.
A clot of congealed blood.
Yeah, and Professor Myers.
Right,
Professor Myers, in saying that you see that there's a mistake in the Quran when it appears in the English translations that you might have come across, when it says that the flesh comes after the bones, because in your expert understanding, flesh comes first, then bones develop after, within the flesh.
Neither. It's co-differentiation of two different tissues. So
I'd like to correct you on one thing. I got Aristotle's view on how gender is determined right in front of us. It says the male is characterized by an abundance of superior element of fire, whereas a female has abundance of water and therefore is rather cold. This is how he said sex was determined, gender was determined. So I think what you're saying is factually incorrect, P.C. Meyer.
No, if you are taking a little tiny fragment out of The Generation of Animals, the big book that Aristotle wrote on the subject. In that book, he explores multiple possible mechanisms for how sex is determined. In fact, in a lot of ways, that book is kind of obsessed with sex and how it how it's formed and what its role is and all these sorts of things. And yeah, he's got multiple ideas in there, but the primary idea that got passed along is the key distinction between what determines the embryo versus, what is the mechanism. And the general idea from Aristotle is that the sperm is the determinant. Mm-hmm. That, to use modern terminology, we'd say that the sperm carries the information to this passive flesh provided by the female that is then shaped into the embryo.
Okay.
And
let's see if we can find a reference. I was quoting for you a research paper on it. So he said Aristotle, sperm determines gender. It would be somewhere, right?
It's more fundamental than that.
Okay, so here's a research paper, and it's confirming exactly what I said. Aristotle, who collected and dissected embryos, claimed that sex was determined by the heat of the male partner during intercourse. Heat of the male partner, not the sperm. So I think you might have mistaken that, PZ.
No, I am not searching through the internet, extracting little fragments that fit my hypothesis. I've actually read The Generation of Animals. And it's much more complicated than that.
But you're saying he actually said the word sperm. Are you saying that he actually said that?
Well, yes.
I did research this, and all my research pretty much, these are research papers you can see online, and they're all saying something.
Galen does use the word spermatos, which is the Greek word for sperm.
Maybe you're getting confused between the two. Maybe
no, I don't think I'm the one confused here.
How are all these people getting it wrong? Maybe I should ask that question.
I don't know that they are getting it wrong. The impression I'm getting is that you are pulling out fragmentary bits of text that are incomplete in their summary of what Aristotle said.
Yeah.
Okay. So here's the deal. Aristotle said a lot of things, and he speculated a great deal about the mechanisms that generate sex and about the differences between the sexes in reproduction. And much of it was wrong. Some of it was right. Much of it was also empirically determined.
Okay,
he was doing experiments and observations.
Let's go along with it. Let's say that...
and I think Aristotle did use the word sperm also, because he talks about semen, right? The word would be spermatos for that, which is, of course, the word sperm, Yeah,
what he believed was it was a sperm from the male and sperm from the female, and then he gave some theory. I'll have to look it up real quick, but let's just go along with it, okay? So let's say Aristotle did say sperm. Okay, fine, but that's a scientifically correct statement. So my question is, how do you copy from Aristotle, as we saw all the scientific error Aristotle did make? How do you copy or borrow from the people at that time and not screw it up? That's what I think is the question which needs to be answered here. And do you have an explanation on that?
Yes, because there is a core of Aristotle's ideas that were correct and that have stood the test of time. In particular, Aristotle's idea of epigenesis, of progressive differentiation, which is basically all that Muhammad is using in his description of embryology, is that one concept. So Aristotle got it right. Muhammad borrows from him or from the intelligentsia of the day. And so it's not surprising that he got it right. He was using the ideas of an excellent scholar that had been studied for centuries before him and came to a reasonable conclusion.
Okay.
There were also other ideas that Aristotle expressed that did not hold up very well, did not stand the test of time. And Muhammad wisely chose not to use those as key little features in his text.
Oh,
But
but now
So-
that's begging the question: how did he wisely choose?
Yeah, how would he even
that's a-
know to choose that versus not, to add it versus to do away with it? I mean, that's
Because the
no evidence of that.
consensus of the, I wouldn't call them scientists, but scholars of the day was that, this progressive
ones?
development was correct.
Which scholars are you referring to?
walk us through the process. Like, okay, so Aristotle's book is filled with all these errors, like he believed that the upper body is formed before the lower body, but then he has this wisdom and he's talking to other people, and these people are guiding Muhammad on to pick out the scientific errors from the book. Is that what you're saying? How to filter through that and just pick out the right thing?
I am saying that there's a great deal of detail in Aristotle's book that was incorrect. And Muhammad is not presenting a detailed analysis of the scientific evidence for Aristotle's views. He's just digesting everything down to a simple story. In this case, that development proceeds progressively, that there's a sequence of things that occur in development to produce the embryo.
So you are making
That's
so
it.
You are not,
That's
you're just saying it was a
really basic.
summary of all of the research which was done at that time, is what you're saying.
No, I'm saying he was. So what I'm saying is that the Quran is a very general book about human behavior, human lives, theology, all those things, and that it includes a few fragments of the story from the scientific community of the time.
Okay, do you agree that those fragments are consistent with modern science?
No.
Okay, let's go to the three stages, the three layers that I mentioned earlier. You're familiar with the amnion membrane, correct?
Correct. Yes.
Okay, in the chorionic membrane.
Yes. The
And the-
allantois, the placenta, these.
Yeah, and the decidua membrane.
The what?
The decidua.
Decidua.
Yeah, decidua.
Decidua. Yes.
Yes. Okay, the membrane. Okay, so some scholars have interpreted these three veils, or these three membranes, as the three veils.
You
of
just
darkness.
named more than three.
Huh? Well,
You just listed more than three.
I just what?
You listed more than three.
No, I only mentioned three. I said the amnion membrane, the chorionic membrane, and the decidua.
And the allantois.
I didn't mention any that membrane.
You didn't mention it, but it's one of the major membranes of the embryo.
Okay, well, so based on what we have here, the Quran mentions he creates you in the wombs of your mothers in stages, one after another. So obviously we know the stages of development. Okay, so that's consistent with science, one after another, in three veils of darkness, thus indicating the continuation of the embryonic development, obviously in the womb, in changing from one stage to another, as we discussed. So once again, embryologists have confirmed that the fetus is surrounded during the stages of development with three membranes. Okay, this is modern science. So once again, embryologists have confirmed that the fetus is surrounded during the stages of development with three membranes. The amnion.
Where are you getting this from?
Well, I'll give it to you. Dr. Beverly Kramer and another gentleman, I forget his name right now, but Dr. Beverly Kramer. So stating that the amnion membrane, which contains a fluid encompassing the fetus to make it in a state of swoon, thus protecting it from trauma that the uterus encounters, and facilitates the fetus movement for reposition smoothly during the labor. Then also the chorionic membrane, the decidua. And once again, some scholars have interpreted these as the three veils of darkness, with the amniotic membrane surrounding the uterus, the wall of the uterus, and the abdomen wall.
Okay, and but this is trickery.
No, it's not trickery.
Yes, it is, because what you're doing is you're being selective. You're counting the membranes until you get to three, and then you say, "Aha, Muhammad was right." And I keep telling you, there are others. There's the allantois. There's the
Okay,
yolk
but would you
membrane.
agree that these are the most prominent of the membranes?
No,
Which are the most prominent?
that they're all essential. We are placental mammals. We have multiple membranes that are all involved in the segregation of the embryo, in providing it nutrients and taking care of waste that it disposes. One of the functions is, as you say, protecting the embryo. So it's in a fluid-filled sac for that. But the roles of these membranes are much more complex than you're saying.
Well, isn't the amniotic membrane, it's surrounding the uterus, correct?
Surrounding the uterus?
Yes, the amniotic membrane surrounding the uterus, or the wall of the uterus, the abdomen wall. So
yeah, but its relationship to the embryo is more complicated than that. So here's my issue here is that I keep telling you, the embryology is pretty complicated. There's a lot of details here. And
I agree.
Yeah, I agree as well.
By pulling out a fragment, a small piece of the story that happens to agree with what Muhammad said.
Well, that's the point. The point that we're trying to deduce is that is what the Quran's stating, even if it's a small portion of what obviously the larger science is going to say. Is it consistent with what science is telling us?
Yeah, but again, this is stuff everyone knew.
Even if it's vague, okay, well, that's the point we're trying to make. Because so quite simply, what transpires is people attempt to undermine the Quran by saying that it's inconsistent with the science. And so, but what we've established here today, so it seems, is that you agree with us that what we're seeing in the Quran, even though it's not going to great explanations about these matters, it is giving information that is consistent with what we find in modern science.
But that's a trivial point.
Well, PZ, the thing
that's what I'm saying.
Well, it's okay.
Let me just say something. The thing which I am like really, really confused and baffled by some of the things you're saying. You're saying, okay, well, like for example, 4 scientifically correct statements on the bee, and
go on, yeah.
I think he froze on us.
Or Aristotle had all this, and I did research this, and I did not find any reference for that. And you're just seeing that you're just,
Brother Nadir, you might want to start over because you froze up on us.
I'm sorry about that.
Okay.
Yeah. So my question for you is, you said, like for example, the bee issue, that this was a knowledge of the time. Can you show me some evidence to back up your claim? Because I did research, I didn't find anything.
My claim of what? Which specific claim are you talking about? I am saying that, for instance, here's a great example. You were telling me that the Quran says that bees eat fruit, which is nonsensical. No, they don't. They eat pollen. Okay, so bees don't eat fruit. Can we then agree that the Quran was wrong about something?
Can you guys hear me?
Now we can.
Hello. Hello.
Go ahead.
Oh, can you get? Okay, I'm sorry. I just cut out over there. Well, now you bring up a good point. Let's challenge that. Let's find out if bees eat fruit. Bees eat fruit. And there you go. We find many references from science stating, yes, bees do eat fruit. And as you mentioned, just go to the beekeeper and you can see this taking place right here. We even got video of it. Here is a video of a honeybee eating fruit. So let me correct you, Dr. Meyer. In fact, you bring up a great point. This is scientific knowledge which 99.9% of people don't know. Yet the Quran mentioned it inside the book. And so my point here is, This was not common knowledge of the day. And I just wish you would just
wait,
correct.
why do you keep saying that? But I disagree.
Yeah.
Can you show me?
This is
But of course,
common practical knowledge among
Myers
beekeepers.
is an embryologist, is not a melitologist, right? But Professor Myers, would you agree that you would be mistaken in saying in restricting the food of the bees to only pollen if it can be shown
nectar, yes.
that nectar, if it can be shown that they have actually eaten or feasted on plums and grapes and things like that? Although you can come with a response that if they did, then there is a good possibility that the person reporting it would have actually observed that. That is something that is observable. That would be a possible response. But to simply say that this is wrong, if it is true, then of course, yeah.
Fundamentally, what I am saying about the Quran is not necessarily that it's wrong, but that it's oversimplified. That it doesn't have any practical knowledge that improves our understanding of the universe beyond what practical applied workers in the field had already determined.
Mm-hmm. Well, but can you correct yourself on bees not eating fruit?
I would, well, it's sort of. It's again more complicated than that. That primarily what bees are eating is the nectar and the pollen. But yeah, sure, I would be totally unsurprised if they also consume other things on the way.
Okay. All right. So my point here, we go back. There are four. Let's say not scientifically correct. Let's just say scientifically acceptable statements. But can you also? You said this stuff was the knowledge of the time. This is what the common people believed, or some reference. Do you know for a fact that the four facts were actually honey was known at the time? But what about the other three? Was that known? Like with a female bee who leaves the hive and goes out in the mountains, was that known?
That well, Aristotle talked about it.
He did, and I didn't. He didn't say the female bee. He believed bees didn't have any gender. He said they were sexless.
Yes.
So this statement right here, was it known by the people of the time that they basically that this is talking about the female? Take your inhabitant and it goes out in the mountain in the tree. It's the female bee which leaves the hive. Was that known? And was that
and I am not familiar with the folklore of the time, so I don't know.
All right.
And actually, I would kind of agree with Aristotle that they're neuter because the worker bees do not reproduce.
That goes against modern science. We know bees have male and female, and you're a scientist.
Worker bees do not, however, reproduce. They're sterile.
Okay, but we're talking about gender. So here's my question.
If we're going to talk about gender, we're getting into a whole nother morass here because I don't think you can talk about gender in terms of bees.
Can we agree on this? Can we agree that if you are doing a copy job from Aristotle, Galen, or whoever it is, you're going to copy over those scientific errors from their books? Can we agree on that?
Yes.
Okay.
Because if I were being thorough, what I would have to do is reproduce many, many chapters of knowledge.
Okay. All right. That's good. All right. Looks like we do have some agreement. And as I want to just repeat, there are good things which atheists can like about the Quran. For example, that it saved millions of children from FAS, fetal alcohol syndrome. It abolished the virginity test, abolished the divorce laws. And so we do have a common ground which we can at least build upon, even though we have disagreements.
And I would not have disagreed with that at the beginning.
So thus far we've covered embryology and something a little bit on bees. In your view, in either of these, is there anything that is glaringly unscientific as per the Quran?
This is a very weird thing to ask me, because, as I said at the beginning, the Quran is not a science textbook.
And I would agree with you on that. But insofar that it gives general descriptions, we like, of things in nature, like was it embryology and bees, is there anything unscientific with regards to those?
Let's see how to put this, because I feel like you're trying to trap me into
No.
the Quran as a scientific source, and I would disagree strongly with that. That I would say that, okay, Walt Whitman's Leaves of Grass then is a scientific treatise, and I would say, well, there's nothing in that book of poetry that contradicts in any blatant way science, but that doesn't make it a work of science.
Of course, I actually do not believe that the Quran is a work of science. I don't think any Muslim actually believes that. Some Muslims might have that impression, but yeah, we wouldn't say that the Quran is a science textbook on science, on the natural sciences. Yeah.
Well, yes. I would say that the Quran has teaches about a lot of different things, and as we did see in the case of the bee, that looks like something coming out straight out of a textbook of science. And so the intent behind that verse is not just tadabbur, but it is stating science. When it said that the bees eat fruit, that was a falsibility test, and we just confirmed that was right. So there is a teaching of science in the Quran, but it's scattered, and we can't say it doesn't teach science at all, because it is there a little bit.
Yeah.
No, it is one sentence. Okay, as you said, it is one sentence. You can't simply extract a sentence and say, well, this is science, because that's not how science works. Science is a process and a procedure. It's not a body of knowledge. And to say that, okay, this book has a fragment that corresponds with another body of knowledge does not make it at all scientific.
Yeah. It's once again, the verses of the Quran are referred to as ayah, signs. They're not science, but signs. But what these signs are pointing to is the study of the science. So it's a couple of ways you can look at it here. So it's by no means is anyone implying that it's a book of science, and this is specifically what these verses are referring to. But we do see signs within the science that are, from what I gather from this conversation, you agree that it's consistent with what we find in science.
But only because it's simple.
Okay, great. But as long as the thing is, as long as it's not contradicting the science. That's why we wanted to bring you on as a biologist. And the main thing is that it's not contradicting the science.
Okay, but my point is that having the occasional agreement with observation and experiment does not imply that there is divine information there.
No, well, that's
a different topic. Yeah, that's a different subject. But would you agree, as a scientist, looking at the history of science, that the Quran is a very important book in that, unlike any other religious book, like the Bible, for example, it spurred generations of scientists that laid the foundation for modern science? Would you at least agree to that, historically speaking?
In part, this puts me in the awkward situation where I have to defend Christianity a little bit, because Christianity did some of that too. That science is the product of human endeavor, and it's not the product of religion. The Bible
came about, at least the New Testament, the 27 books, around the 3rd century with Athanasius. Are you familiar with? Could you name perhaps one notable scientist within the first few centuries after the canonization of the New Testament that contributed anything significant to the body of science? You're a Christian scientist.
No, again, I'm not defending Christianity.
Yeah, but because you said that Christianity led to scientific endeavor. So
yes.
My question would be, is there a single Christian within the early centuries of Christianity after the canonization of the Christian Bible, which happened at the time of Athanasius, about 3rd century, right? Or rather 4th
So
century.
the only way you can make this argument is by narrowing the range of allowable times, because what I would then say is, okay, that's fine. I agree that early Christianity was characterized by zealotry and dogma, and that it later progressed.
Yeah.
And
later, in fact, many Christian scientists would say that later period was actually due to their interaction with Muslims in Andalusia, for example. But in the Dark Ages, right? That's as it was progressing out to the Dark Ages, to enter into the period of
Dark Ages
Enlightenment.
is a bad term, but that of course there's a synergy between multiple peoples that led to progress in science. I would never ever argue that what we need is a monoculture, that only Christianity does X, Y, and Z, and that kind of nonsense. That we all benefit when multiple cultures get together and share the benefit of their different perspectives.
No doubt about that.
A question for you, PZ. Okay, so we saw earlier the great things Islam did, like for example, it saved millions of children from fetal alcohol syndrome, as a research did. My question for you is, what good has atheism done?
Many of the great scientists of the 20th and 21st century are atheists. You can't deny that. For instance, the majority of the people in the National Academies of Sciences are atheists. So if we're just talking about science, then we have a clear-cut case to make. But at the same time, I wouldn't say that being religious precludes you from contributing to science at all.
I would actually disagree with that statement. I would say that most of them, although typically identified as atheists, when it comes down to it, when you actually interview them, they would probably be more agnostic than atheistic, as in they wouldn't be actively denying God. They would just simply say, I don't know. Would that be a more accurate depiction of most scientists would hold? You don't know. That's more agnosticism.
No, I would disagree there. That when you survey the upper ranks of the scientific community, you find many more atheists. It's a pretty clear-cut correlation.
So we can agree. Let's say they're atheists, but that doesn't mean that their atheism is causing and producing scientists. There's many Christian, Muslim scientists as well, but I don't think that answers that. Producing scientists. Is there any evidence for that, or
is there evidence for what?
That atheists, I guess that doesn't answer the question, what good is there in atheism? Because, I mean, sure, there's atheist scientists, but there's also Muslims and Christian scientists as well.
Yes.
But that doesn't tell me what good atheism has done for the world.
Atheism is a conclusion from the evidence.
Mm-hmm.
So if you were expecting me to unveil some grand presupposition of atheism that contributes to the well-being of the world, I would say that no, that's not there.
Well, we have that in our religion. Here, let me show you. We can look at our religion and say Islam has changed the world for the better. This is called the Great Islamic Golden Age of Science. Let me just read to you what the historians say. That the biological sciences of the Arabic Islamic world underwent a remarkable development during the 8th and 13th century. A flowering knowledge of intellect and later spread out through Europe and greatly influenced both medical practices and education. Now, this came from the Quran itself, the Islamic Golden Age. Okay, and so we can look to our religion. I just want to give you one last quote here. Yeah. From a historian. One major factor of the Islamic Empire enjoyed such a blossoming of thought that comes from Islam itself. Somewhat usually, many parts of the Islamic holy texts place value on education and scientific discovery, regardless of the information's origin. So we can look at our religion and we can see, wow, Islam has brought so much good into the world. But I guess my point here is when we look at atheism, what can we say atheism has really produced?
So I think what Nadir is trying to ask you here, that atheism as a worldview, right? Is there any mechanism within the worldview of atheism that actually encourages innately within the worldview that would encourage an atheist to be philanthropic, for example, to do good for the world? Yeah. Is there anything within the
I also
worldview?
want something recorded that we can point to atheism. Wow, thank you so much for atheism has given such good in this world.
You know, this is a really common canard. That here you are, you're talking to me. I have been an atheist all my life. And you want to imply that I have no basis for indulging in philanthropy or contributing to the well-being of the world.
No, that I don't agree with that.
Well, that's the implication.
Nothing. What can it offer me?
What can atheism offer you? It can offer you a clear, unbiased view of the natural world.
That's an opinion. That's your opinion. You're not proving anything. I mean,
no, I'm saying that
says the same thing. Christians say the same thing.
Everything that we see in nature can be explained scientifically without recourse to deities.
Okay, let me ask you a question, because I've pondered the idea of whether or not I can find anything in nature that has created itself. Can you name anything that's created itself?
Life itself.
Huh?
Life itself.
Life itself created itself?
Yes.
Can you prove that?
Well, with regards to that, I recall the discussion that your colleague Peter Atkins, I'm sure you've perhaps you're friends with him.
Oh yeah,
had,
Peter.
Yeah, with John Lennox, right? So John Lennox, Professor John Lennox, I'm sure you're familiar with him also. So asked him this question. Unfortunately, okay, I get that. But so he asked Professor Atkins, this question. Of course, those who don't know, Professor Peter Atkins is well-renowned chemist. His textbook is used as a standard in colleges. So anyway, he asked Professor Atkins the question, what is the origin of the DNA? How did the DNA come to be? And Peter Atkins essentially did not have an answer for that. So perhaps, do you have an answer to that?
Do I have the answer, the crystal clear answer? Well, obviously, this is a work in progress, but the current explanations for the origin involve first the evolution of metabolism, completely independent of DNA, RNA, all that stuff. That once you have a metabolism that can tap into an energy source, a chemical energy source, then there's selection for processes that preserve information across generations. And that leads to the adoption of RNA, which is already present as a metabolite and as a catalyst in the chemistry of the cell, to act as a storage mechanism for information.
All right. That is.
I don't have enough brain cells to understand that.
That is a much better response than Professor Atkins was able to muster. But
I'm sure if you gave Peter Atkins enough time, he could have given you a much.
Oh, he had ample time in the debate that they had. Yeah. But are you saying that this is something that is replicable, that can be replicated in the lab? So that is this an exhaustive?
It has not been replicated yet. I mean, we've got individual steps in this process that have to be spliced together in order to make it work. But we're working towards it. The thing is that fundamentally, when you look at the biology of the cell, it's chemistry. There's nothing but chemistry in the cell. So that's all we need to explain it, is chemical processes, and we don't need anything beyond that.
Okay.
Okay. So, Professor Myers, I want to ask you a question, and I don't mean to put you on the spot by this, but I'm just kind of curious as to what your stance is on this now. In the past, you were asked, "Why do you hate Muslims?" I don't think you hate Muslims personally. I don't think
no.
you haven't acted with us as though you have any type of hatred whatsoever. You've been very kind. You're acting like a gentleman, as a matter of fact, and I thank you for that, and thank you for coming today. But what do you think about Islam overall? Because in your response to that question, why do you hate Muslims? You said, "I don't hate Muslims. I hate Islam." So I'm just curious. Do you still feel that way, or is it just something you didn't really mean? You just said it.
No, I'm a scientist and an educator, and I put a very high priority on education, knowledge, learning, and all that stuff. And yes, you can tell me, and I will agree that there's a strong Islamic tradition supporting education and learning. Okay. But the core tenets of Islam are not in accordance with the universe.
And
They contradict the way the world works.
What tenets are you referring to?
Well, the core one of the existence of a deity.
Okay, well, excluding
the idea of an afterlife.
Well, okay, we realize you don't believe in those things, but I'm talking about just the way of life itself. And has Islam in some way affected you personally to the point where you would develop a hatred for Islam itself?
This is an abstract hatred, okay? It's saying that this is a way of thinking and a way of life that are incompatible with the way I think and live. And so
in what regard? If you don't mind me asking. Are you saying just from an atheist and a belief in a creator versus a disbelief from that aspect?
That's part of it, yeah.
By hate, because you seem hesitant to reiterate that strong word here that you might have used before.
Because, I hesitate because I don't want to imply that my goal is discrimination.
When you used the word hate back then, whenever that was, did you mean hate as in something that you disagree with simply, or something that you actually disdain?
Yeah, I disdain it and I disagree with it. All that.
That's what I'm curious about.
Here's the thing is when I'm saying that, I am not saying that I want to tear down mosques, or that I want to ban prayer, or even worse, kick Muslims out of the country, or anything stupid like that. It's more of a philosophical difference that I would not be able to bridge. That you will never see me converting to Islam or Christianity or Judaism or any of.
But okay, so in saying that, do you hate Christianity? Do you hate Judaism, or is it just specific?
In exactly the same sense.
In the same way. Okay. Well,
I have one question. So, what do you think when Christians espouse the type of hatred you were just mentioning about tearing down mosques and about attacking Muslims and things like that?
Totally reprehensible.
Mm-hmm.
I would oppose that. For instance, I was out demonstrating in the Somali part of Minneapolis, where you may have heard we've had a number of right-wing crazies come through and, claim that they're trying to impose Sharia law, and that our representatives who are Muslim are just evil and bad.
You're saying the right wingers were making those claims. That's what you're saying? Yeah.
Yes. And I was there opposing those. And I will continue to oppose that kind of view.
Professor Meyer, you said that you would never catch me converting to Islam or Christianity or Judaism, but never say never. You recall what's his name? Your colleague as well passed away now, Anthony Flew, right? I mean, I think he was more verbal in his attacks against theism than you have been, and yet at the end, before the end, he converted essentially. to theism.
Yeah, but then, you got to take into. Are you suggesting that I might become senile and then I'll become
Well,
Muslim?
that is the accusation that people leveled against Professor
Yeah.
Flu. But, in the interview,
there was a lot of evidence that he was
but in the
slipping
interview,
mentally,
yeah, in the
and
interview,
he was also abused by somebody who was supposed to be his caretaker. So there's a lot of ugly stuff in
sure,
the prison.
any person reaching that age would experience forgetfulness and things like that. But in the interview that they conducted soon, well, just before he passed away, right? It's available on YouTube. He seems quite lucid. He doesn't seem senile or someone suffering from Alzheimer's.
Yeah, I don't think he had Alzheimer's.
Yeah.
I think he was just old and lonely and taken advantage of, which can happen to any of us.
Sure.
Yeah, but I would say that is not. I'm sure for you guys, that would not be appropriate grounds to spread your religion. Is to wait until somebody was weak and you could take advantage of them and you could impose the beliefs on them.
No, of course not.
You would rather have them come to this knowledge in the fullness of their awareness and senses, right?
No, we leave that to God. God is the one that guides.
But don't give us ideas. Yeah, I got to get going, guys. But thank you so much, PZ. It was a very nice discussion. Thank you, guys. Very nice meeting you after such a long time. All right.
Brother Nadir, thank you for joining the panel,
Yeah.
and we'll talk to you next time. Assalamu alaikum.
Yeah,
Okay. Yeah, 2 hours. I should wrap it up here too.
Yeah. Okay. Professor Myers, I certainly thank you for joining the show. It's been a good interaction, and we encourage you to maybe we can get you on again at some point and in the future. Sure. But we certainly enjoyed you coming on, and I thank you for the quick response and for agreeing so you seem to be. I'm glad you came. Alhamdulillah. Thank you for coming. And
okay, it was fun.
Okay,
yeah, and we do appreciate your work in the field. It is an important field for all of humanity, right? Biology, and we appreciate it absolutely, regardless of the fact that you hate religion. Thank you, Professor Myers.
Yeah, I don't think you really. I don't think it's a true hatred for Islam.
Not in a visceral, violent sense.
I don't think so. I was like, I want to give him the opportunity to clear that up because I don't think that's what you were implying at all.
Right.
You seem to be quite a gentleman, and once again, I thank you for coming on.
Okay.
All right. Have a great evening.
Later.
All right. Have a good one.
Bye.
Yeah.
Whoops. Oh. Okay. Let me add. It's actually brother. You've been on or off as well. Okay. So that was a good discussion. Alhamdulillah.
Yeah. I'm happy with it.
Yeah. He's a gentleman. Of course, he's not going to agree with everything that we're trying to.
No. Of course not. But, he won't. But I actually learned a lot about both sides because there was a like what both sides of that argument have to understand is that we do not claim that the Quran is a book of science.
No,
it's not a book of science at all.
No.
It is a book of signs it is a religious book of signs. It is and we do not claim that it is a scientific manual, that is a scientific reference, that is a scientific and then so they say that they get all like upset and up in arms that it's they compare it to 2020 like science of 2020 and microscopic images and come on, that's not the comparison that we are alleging. That's not the comparison that we are making. But I need to talk about something now that our guests have gone, now that our guests have left. I need to talk about something as if I can have just a minute. as one of the hosts here of Consider This TV, I see some very deplorable behavior going on in the chat here.
Katarina, you're breaking up on us for some reason. Okay, I'm not sure what's going on with her sound. She was breaking up. Brother Ibn Anwar, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, maybe it was my. She was breaking up on my end, so we'll see if she can fix her sound over there. But yeah, so the people in the chat, we need to be decent to one another and not be making rude comments in the chat. But yeah, it was nice having brother. No, brother. I'm used to calling people brother all the time. Professor PZ Myers on. He was quite a gentleman, and I enjoyed the conversation with him. Yeah, so good conversation. Good conversation.
Yeah.
So okay, so let's stop it there, and I'm going to just remind everyone about the debate tomorrow. Brother Ziad was going to be debating Stephen Atkins tomorrow at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, on the topic, where and how did Jesus claim to be God? So looking forward to that. So be sure to tune in to that tomorrow evening. And I guess with that being said, I will leave you by saying Assalamu alaikum, rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Peace be upon everyone who's been watching. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide all of us and keep us on the straight path, inshallah. So,
Inshallah.
Brother Ibn Anwar, thank you for coming once again. And we'll see you next time. Assalamu alaikum, rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.